I think one of BioWare's most interesting skills as a game developer is how well they do start screens. That's this screen here that shows up when you first build up the game. They're in basically every game, but so rarely do you notice them. Except in BioWare titles, I'll always remember the first time I opened Mass Effect 3 to be greeted by this. It's a simple melody with some simple visuals, but it establishes so much about the game. The tune is melancholy and sad, the end has come, but there's still hope in there too, still a chance of victory. In essence, it's a perfect summary of the entire game to follow. Their next game is even better. Dragon Age Inquisition's start screen looks like this. Templars on one side, mages on the other, two warring factions marching together towards a conference of peace. The melody starts quiet and raises in intensity, full of optimism and hope. The dawn will come. Then, when you start a new game... So much for peace talks. Mass Effect Andromeda opens like this. It's probably the simplest of them all so far, a static shot of an alien world on a field of stars, but it too says everything about the game. The track is called A Better Beginning, and it's the main motif of the game. The melody is curious, optimistic, but also cautious and reserved. It's one of my favourite soundtracks in any game ever. Mass Effect Andromeda is a meme. It's been a meme since launch, and it will remain a meme for the rest of its life. Meme status is almost inescapable, and there's been no game release memed quite as much as Mass Effect Andromeda. Plagued with bugs, filled to the brim with boring busy work, this game is considered a massive disappointment by most people. Except by me. I love this game. I've loved this game since launch, bugs and all. And that sucks for me because this is a really hard game to defend. I mean, how do you defend this?
My father's dead. He made me his successor.
Alec is dead.
I mean, that is hilarious, but it's not good, is it? It's not defendable. And that's always been my issue defending this game. It's kind of a bad game, but I don't love it in a so bad it's good way. A long time ago, I wrote an hour-long defense of Mass Effect Andromeda, but I scrapped it because I didn't find my own arguments convincing. And also the laptop I wrote it on got bricked, so that's probably more the reason, to be honest. The point is, defending this game is really, really hard, but I'm going to give it another go anyway. The next Mass Effect game has officially been announced, and it's probably not an Andromeda sequel if this random store description is anything to go by, but maybe, just maybe we can hold on to hope for a little bit longer. So let me tell you why Mass Effect Andromeda is great actually, and it deserves a sequel. I'm going to, for the most part, ignore bugs. It's been 5 years since the game came out, and most of the egregious ones have since been patched out.
My father's dead. He made me his successor.
Alec is dead.
I'm not saying that the game launching in such an unfinished state was good or defendable, just the getting bogged down in a discussion of bugs is unhelpful here. I'll save that for a different video someday. Bugs are not really the core of the issue anyway. There are plenty of people who still hate this game in its bug-free state. It's a badly designed game. The story is long and meandering, full of busy work, and the bad guy looks like a big dumb lemur with a donut on his head. I get why people don't like this game, I really do. I actually think maybe half the reason this game disappoints so many people is that it starts so strong. If you're unfamiliar with Andromeda, here's the basic premise. A collection of humans and other aliens have decided to leave our galaxy and start a new civilization in the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the closest galaxy to ours. They all pack into giant spaceships and get frozen for the long haul. 650 years later, they wake up at their destination. It's quite a hefty premise for a game, and there are problems with it, but stick with it for now, we'll get back to it later. Things don't work out as planned. In the years since the journey began, a massive tendrily cloud of dark energy has spread across the galaxy, and it has wreaked havoc on the intended planet for human settlement, codenamed Habitat 7. You play as Sarah Orscott, or insert name here, Ryder, the child of the Pathfinder Alec Ryder, whose job it is to find and explore new worlds for safe habitation. He assembles the team and you head down to the surface to investigate the planet, but things don't go smoothly. While it's not as dramatic as 2 or as bleak as 3, I think Andromeda has the strongest opening in the series. There's so much going on, but the game does a perfect job of disguising tutorials while also building intrigue and characters. Habitat 7 is a weird place full of floating rocks and random thunderstrikes and weird glowing yellow spiral plants. It feels like an alien world. You can beeline straight through the story stuff, but you can also take your time exploring all the nooks and crannies, and there's a lot to discover. The game introduces several of its key mysteries very early on. It introduces the mysterious new enemies of the game, but also the older ruins that they're studying. Not giving anything away just yet, but allowing the player and the characters to speculate. You spend the entire first half of the mission with just Liam, and the two quickly develop a likeable banter.
Weird.
If that's poison, I know who to blame.
The second half of the mission you spend with your dad. He's the hero for now, and you're just part of the team, but obviously that doesn't last long. He activates some kind of weird alien terraformer which unleashes a shockwave and pushes you both off a cliff, ending with him sacrificing himself to save your life, making you the new Pathfinder. Habitat 7 is essentially a microcosm of the game to come. It's got some exploring, some combat, some banter, some daddy issues, and some excellent visuals, and it's a sad truth that the rest of the game never quite delivers in what this intro promises. By far, the biggest problem people have with this game is that it's kind of tedious and boring. The rest of your time in the game can be roughly split like so. About 10% of your time will be spent in linear, story-driven missions, about 20% of your time will be spent talking to NPCs, and the remaining 70% of time will be spent driving around deserts. We have a rock desert, a snow desert, a green desert, a space desert, and a desert. Your ability to enjoy this game is very much tied to your tolerance for driving around deserts, which understandably is pretty low for a lot of people. Obviously I'm being hyperbolic here, you're not just driving around, you're doing missions, you're occasionally getting out to scan something or shoot something, but driving around a desert is the spirit of it. It's very long and very slow, and probably most importantly, none of the planets you visit are as interesting as Habitat 7. The game is gorgeous, but nothing else in the game feels as alien and weird as Habitat 7 does. Eos, for example, just looks a lot like the Nevada desert. It's a pretty landscape, but it's a normal one. And you have to do the desert drive. As Pathfinder, your job is to establish colonies on planets, and to do that you need to make them viable for habitation. And to do that you need to do random things that make numbers go up. The main one is turn on those environmental stabilizers, but that won't get you all of the way there. You're gonna have to do the busy work if you want that colony. I think it's possible to enter a rhythm while doing these and really enjoy the meticulousness of it, but if you don't hit that rhythm, then it's a tedious nightmare, and I totally get why it would cause a lot of people to quit.
Okay, Sam, what's Volt got for us? This is kind of fun.
Mining zones in this region are available, Pathfinder. Automated protocols activated. Deploying forward station. I'm reading a normal temperature range, Pathfinder.
We don't want your stuff. Stop shooting.
And if that doesn't cause you to quit, maybe the endless menus will. Less the design of the menus, though they are pretty cluttered and hard to read, more the spirit of the menus. This is a game with a console in the centre of the ship with 3 entirely different interconnected systems that all require different resources to keep track of. We've got the research and development interface, which are 2 separate things by the way. First you need to research a technology using research points, which you primarily get by scanning things in the environment. There's 3 different kinds of research points you can gather: Milky Way, Andromeda Galaxy and Remnant, and they can only be applied to their respective technology. Once you've researched something, you can move on to the development side, where you can actually build the things you've researched. This of course will require the materials to build the things, which you can mostly get by scouring around in the car for minerals and looting chests for components. Or you can also get them via these 2 other consoles. This one here is the AVP console, or Andromeda Viability Points. You earn these as you do all that desert driving we were talking about before. You can spend these points on cryo blocks, unfreezing colonists to do things, which in gameplay terms means granting you special perks like increased inventory or a steady supply of cash money. The final terminal here is the Apex Strike Team console. Here you can field squads to go do missions to get all sorts of materials, including the currency for this console, mission funding, which you can use to upgrade your strike teams. This is also the multiplayer tie-in console, and some of the missions you actually have the option of playing yourself in multiplayer. You want to know the punchline? You don't have to do any of this shit. It's all completely optional. You can easily beat the entire game without ever touching any of these consoles. So if the game is extremely tedious and full of redundant systems, why are you putting up with it all? For the engaging sci-fi plot and story? This is where we get into the hot takes, because common wisdom is that the story of Andromeda is bad, which I don't think it is, though I do think it's very, shall we say, CinemaSins friendly? It's a very easy story to critique. It's full of holes and things that don't make sense, and things that are just a bit silly. For example, there's an entire faction of enemies, the Exiles, that realistically should not exist. They're around for gameplay reasons alone, because in-universe it's almost completely unbelievable that there would be this many Initiative members ready to drop all and live as pirates ready to kill you. The story goes that when the Nexus, the big space station that serves as home base for the Initiative, arrived in Andromeda, everything went wrong. The leadership was mostly dead, and in the chaos, a faction of people on the station abandoned the Initiative to go do their own thing. As a story beat, that's a fine idea. The weird part is that leaving the Initiative somehow also translates into becoming a ruthless fight-to-the-death pirate. That's dumb, and there's no way around it. It's dumb. It does not make sense. The game is full of stuff like this, stuff that if you think about it really doesn't make much sense. I won't go through all of them because I don't think it would be worthwhile, but it's distracting. Or it will be if you focus on it. I also don't think you can get around the fact that the Archon is an extremely weak villain. He's just a big dude who wants to become more powerful. There's no personal connection to him, no opposed ideology to fight. He's just a big angry hoop man. There are plenty of videos that will give you a blow-by-blow of every issue with Andromeda's story, and I'm not interested in repeating that. Instead, I want to try and convince you, despite its flaws, that this game is greater than the sum of its parts. Let's talk about the Initiative. 100,000 people who got frozen on big spaceships and went to another galaxy. Why? Why would they do that? The most basic premise of the game is a hard one for people to get behind because it seems kinda dumb. Why would you freeze yourself for 600 years to explore and inhabit a new galaxy when our own galaxy is still so thoroughly unexplored? Beyond the obvious out-of-game explanation that they needed a way to make another Mass Effect game that had no overlap with the trilogy for obvious reasons. That very question is actually a core component of the game's story. See, the Initiative isn't primarily about exploration. It's actually a utopian post-nationalist movement created by an eccentric billionaire. You can ask almost every NPC in the game why they joined the Initiative. Some because they wanted to explore, some because they were escaping from their past. But the most popular answer is that they believed in the vision. They believed in this new society where everyone worked together and the baggage of the history of their own galaxy was left behind.
Back at you, Costa. Why do you come?
I want to say I'm running from my past, but really running from myself. That'd be a great story. But it's bullshit. I had family, friends, a good enough job, nothing was wrong. I just heard about the Initiative and I believed in it. I believed in a new beginning. Still do. I have to. We're in it.
If you're familiar with Mass Effect lore, then you know that the galaxy is made from thousands of years of war and resentment. The Mass Effect trilogy thrives in the messy space politics that Shepard has to deal with. The Andromeda Initiative's goal is to leave it all behind, get on a big spaceship and build a new, better society from the ground up. A fresh history with all the different alien races working together. It's much closer to Star Trek than Star Wars, and it's probably the biggest point of contrast between the original games and Andromeda. The Mass Effect trilogy is about a galactic apocalypse, the end of civilization. It's about making the hard choices that come at the end of times. Will you hold on to your ideals no matter what, like a true paragon, or will you abandon the moral high ground in favour of survival like a renegade? Andromeda is the complete opposite. Andromeda is about the beginning of a new civilization. A better beginning, you could say. There's no paragon or renegade because it's not that kind of story. It's not about making the hard choices, it's about making the easy ones. The question is not paragon or renegade, it's how much do you believe in the vision? Everything that could have possibly gone wrong with the Initiative dead. The two primary figures in the Initiative, Jean Garson and your dad, are dead. There's a pissed off faction of bony weirdos out to kill them. There's a splinter group who think they've been conned into a miserable existence in another universe. 3 of the 4 arcs, aka 60,000 people, are missing, and even the planets they were supposed to colonize are unlivable. Will you let all of that dissuade you? Will you let it break you? Or will you get out there and make the dream a reality despite all of the challenges in your way? It doesn't sound as compelling a setup for an RPG, and to be completely honest with you, it's not. As an RPG, Andromeda is much weaker than the trilogy. There's no Caden or Ashley type choices, because it's just not that kind of story. It wouldn't fit. As a story though, Andromeda is really compelling, at least if you're into optimistic sci-fi like me. I'd like to think the idea of the Initiative has a universal appeal, a world where there's no discrimination or ostracism, where people's individual strengths are recognised and everyone works together for the betterment of all. That sounds pretty great to me, and it sounds like a vision worth fighting for no matter what challenges it has. Pause. This is all great and lovely and very utopian and all, but we have to stop now and talk about colonialism. I feel like I've been doing that a lot recently and I don't know why. It's all well and good to fly over to a new galaxy and start a new civilization, but what about the people who already live there? If Andromeda doesn't get flack for the bugs or the tedium of the content, then it's probably for the colonialism. If you've been around this channel for a while, then you know that I don't shy away from calling this stuff out and calling it what it is. So please bear with me while I try and explain why this game's relationship with colonial is way more complicated than you might expect. Andromeda only has 2 new alien races from the Andromeda Galaxy, the Ket and the Angara, though the Angara are the native species of the area and the Ket are also from somewhere else. It's through these 2 foreign factions, the Ket and the Initiative, that Andromeda shows 2 contrasting visions of colonialism. But let's start by talking about the Angara, because I want to start by making something clear. The Angara are not noble savages. In almost every colonialism is bad story, we end up with noble savages. People who are obviously supposed to be Native Americans, who love nature and freedom and all that flower power stuff. We've all seen this before, and that's why we're all so excited for Avatar 2. The Angara may initially feel like this, but they're not. The Angara are a spacefaring civilization in their own right. They're currently on the back foot after the Scourge messed up their planets and the Ket started a war that's been ongoing for 80 years, but they're of a technology level equal to that of the Initiative. They have scientists and spaceships and laser guns. Their capital city on Aya is arguably the nicest and most advanced area in the whole game. This has an interesting consequence in the colonialist narratives we're used to seeing. This isn't the British arriving on the shores of America to find the natives severely underpowered against their guns. This is more like Americans arriving on the shores of France in the middle of World War II. A very different situation to say the least. Actually, scratch that. Trying to make a direct allegory between this game and any legitimate historical events is impossible and unhelpful, because this is a silly sci-fi premise where the faction of colonists have gotten on a spaceship for 650 years and literally cannot go home. Trying to map this onto any real historical events is just going to be a mess, so instead, let's just explore the moral implications of this situation and leave any historical mapping snapping to the side. Not every moral issue needs a direct historical comparison to be meaningful. The Angara have a culture based on emotional openness. If you're happy, you tell someone. If you're angry, you tell them that too. And it's this openness that the Kett initially exploited. It's explained that when the Kett first arrived, they showed no hostility towards the Angara, before swiftly kidnapping their leaders and bombing their cities, because the Kett are an expansionist empire fueled by eugenics. That's why when you arrive, they're extremely mistrusting, and there's even an enemy faction of anti-alien Angara called the Rokar, who you tangle with on several occasions. In that way, sometimes the initiative story feels closer to an immigration story than to a colonial one. They talk a lot about being good neighbours to the Angara, but obviously it's not that clear-cut, because the game also included a look at a much worse way of doing things. The Exiles, instead of forming their own colony, take over an Angaran port and rule the place with an iron fist. While it's clear they treat their own people as badly as the Angara, it still has much bigger colonial overtones, not coexisting but claiming. The whole thing is messy and hard to define. The leader of the Angara resistance sums it up like this.
I hope the initiative is making a good impression.
The initiative. Sounds so unthreatening, like a city planner meeting.
It's kind of what it's meant to be.
City planners don't walk around in battle armor with rifles on their shoulder.
Depends on the city. My point is, we traveled through dark space to build something here.
That's what invaders always say. At first.
We're not invaders.
Of course.
That there's colonial overtones in the game is undeniable, but Andromeda is committed to exploring the issue and presenting many possible answers. I don't think it always gets it right, but it's trying, which is more than I can say for a lot of other stories that fumble into this mess. Well, the story has some intrigue and some interesting themes on its own. The true star of Mass Effect Andromeda is the crew. More than any other BioWare game, the crew of Andromeda feels real, and the atmosphere the game builds over its long runtime really does capture the vibe of space friends on a road trip. Like Mass Effect 1, Andromeda has 6 squad mates to choose from, and in fact they're all deliberate echoes of those original characters, sometimes inverted in comically literal ways, like Garrus was a male Turian cop, Sylvetra is a female Turian convict. Liam Costa is our Kaidan, though let's be real, he's way more interesting than Kaidan. Cora Harper is our Ashley, ditto. PB is our Asari scientist like Liara, Drac is our Rex, and then Jal, the Angara liaison, is our Tali. Less in race or class similarities, but in role. He's the expert on the enemy we're fighting.
I feel like the Angara and the Quarians have so much in common.
Because the Tempest is a much smaller ship than the Normandy, an effort was made to make all the characters, even the non-combat ones, fully developed. So there's also Dr. Lexi, who's voiced by Natalie Dormer by the by, Callow the pilot and one of the ship's original designers, Suvi the ship's resident scientist, and Gil the ship's engineer. The thing is though, Andromeda is so much better at doing character stuff than Mass Effect 1 was. So many systems in the game have been added from years of BioWare games since to make these characters feel more real. My favourite is that the crew are constantly talking to each other. They hang around in different parts of the ship. They talk about the missions that just happened. You can actually see them form different relationships with each other as well as with Ryder. Vetra and Drac knew each other from the past and often hang out together. Liam and Jal start a sort of friendly banter where they insult each other all the time. Gil, the engineer, starts a poker game where he constantly beats everybody. PB and Lexi clash constantly because PB is an annoying brat. More on that in a little bit. Not only does the game have Mass Effect 2's loyalty missions, it also has the Mass Effect 3 system where when you're on the Citadel, the crew's doing their own things and you can often go do things with them. Andromeda is the culmination of all these systems in one game and it works perfectly. The Andromeda crew is really endearing, both as a collective and individually, each with their own interesting arcs and layers to unpeel as you get to know them better. Like Drac, for example, initially he presents as a completely typical Krogan. Big and strong, loves to fight. We've met this guy 100 times already. But the more you get to know him, the more depth he shows. The Mindless Warrior isn't really a front he has, it's just a misinterpretation of him. Drac is over 1400 years old, easily the oldest companion in the series by a huge margin. And you don't live that long by being a mindless idiot. The Initiative was actually his retirement plan. All of that history that the Initiative was escaping from, Drac was actually a part of, and he's was done with it, ready to settle down and lie on a beach somewhere. It's just that when he got here and everything went sideways, he couldn't just sit around and do nothing, so he went back to doing what he's good at. The more you get to know him, the less he seems like a scary Krogan warrior, and the more he becomes the lovable old grandpa of the team. He's seen it all and nothing really phases him anymore. He's moved beyond the anger and rage that drives so many Krogan in the original series into something more mellow and wizened. I won't go through all of the characters because I'm hoping by now to have convinced you to do that yourself, but I do want to talk about PB. Of the whole cast, PB is probably the hardest to like. She's just kind of unlikable. She's aloof and mysterious, but not in a way that's cool, just in a way that's irritating and feels like she's trying too hard, which is actually the case. Like, in-game, that's actually what she's doing. Despite her being kind of annoying to talk to at first, PB is actually the most interesting character to get to know, because as you learn more about her, your understanding of her attitude completely shifts. PB came to Andromeda because of her girlfriend. Her girlfriend is also the one who woke her up out of stasis early, which she held over her and essentially guilted her into staying with her for, until she broke it up. PB, when you meet her, has just come out of an emotionally abusive situation. Her aloof and uncaring, not looking to make friends attitude is a front she's putting up to avoid being hurt again. Once you get that, you also see why she's so antagonistic towards Lexi, because along with being the ship medic, Lexi is also a therapist, and she can read PB like an open book. And as the game goes along, so can most of the crew, actually. It's a bold choice to start a character by making her intentionally unlikable, but I think it actually makes her arc across the game way stronger to do it that way if you stick with her, because at the end of her loyalty mission, you get one of the most interesting choices in the game. Are you going to let PB save her abusive ex, or are you going to shoot her instead? Earlier I said that Andromeda was a less interesting setup for an RPG, and that's true, but that doesn't mean it's a bad one. Without the Telegraph, Paragon, or Renegade options, every choice in the game becomes a lot harder to make. What's actually better for PB here? Is she just going to keep obsessing over this obviously toxic woman if you let her save her? Or will saving her bring PB some sort of closure? You've only got 5 seconds to decide, so make it quick. The biggest problem with the Paragon Renegade system isn't that it makes choices too easy, it's that it discourages making half of the choices. The way the series works, you need to commit to one path or the other in order to unlock the responses later in the game. Andromeda doesn't have that, and as such, the only judgment of your choices can be you. And that's how we're going to pivot into the final part of the crew, Ryder themselves. Ryder is a character I really enjoy, but in order to enjoy Andromeda and its player character, you kind of need to meet the game where it's at. Last year, I made a video about Shepard and how the trilogy blurs the lines between player-created character and independent character. Well, Andromeda doesn't do that, really. If we pull out the old RPG character scale from that video, then Andromeda is more like, here, but it doesn't tell you that. Mass Effect Andromeda has a custom character creator, just like all the previous BioWare games, that as anyone who's ever actually used it will tell you, it's shockingly bad. It's legitimately worse than the one they had a full decade ago in Mass Effect 1, which is the first point in my conspiracy theory that it was tacked on after the fact and was never supposed to be in the game. I know that sounds crazy for an RPG, but so much of Andromeda makes way more sense if the only character choice in the game is which twin you want to play as. Both twins have a default first name, and unlike John and Jane Shepard, if you pick the default name, characters will use it all the time.
Ryder, Sarah, Recon Specialist, Pathfinder Mission Team.
Sarah Ryder, let's get you checked out.
Good morning, Sarah. Are you feeling well?
That's almost unheard of for an RPG protagonist, and it adds a level of personhood that just isn't there with a custom protagonist.
Ryder, Recon Specialist, Pathfinder Mission Team.
Ryder, let's get you checked out.
Good morning, Ryder. Are you feeling well?
Both of the twins have their own separate, unchoosable backstories, and because your dad is such a big part of the game, that's also a huge part of Ryder's story as well. Most importantly, the entire dialogue structure of the game just isn't set up in a way to facilitate player expression. It's organised like the previous Mass Effect games, but the actual way it works is way closer to something like The Witcher, where the only choices you get are the ones that would be in character. If there's 4 options, then it's not yes or no, it's different ways of saying the same thing that instead of determining determining actions determine tone. It's easier to demonstrate than it is to explain. Your responses are mapped onto 4 possibilities: emotional, logical, casual, and professional. Not all of them are always available, although when there's only 2 options, you usually either have the option of the top 2 or the bottom 2. Any of these responses would be in character for Ryder. What you're deciding is how you want to handle these conversations. Are you going to be flippant and sarcastic when dealing with the big bad guy, or are you going to take it seriously? It actually, weirdly enough, has a lot more in common with the dialogue system from Dragon Age 2 than any of the Mass Effect games. But Andromeda has more dialogue spoken outside of player control than any previous BioWare game, and that's where Ryder's personality comes through. As a Pathfinder, Ryder is kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. Part soldier, part diplomat, part scientist. Their characterization is very different from Shepard. They aren't a commander in the military, they have a much more casual vibe. And Ryder's personal arc across the game is them learning to become the leader that everyone expects them to be. Ryder is much younger than Shepard, and they feel it too. They're kind of a goofball who makes a lot of jokes, who then gets thrust into a position way more important than they were expecting. After all, they were trying to be part of the squad, not to lead it. The game leaves the details of that character growth up to the player. Is Ryder a cocky hothead who gladly accepts the Pathfinder role despite not having the respect of others yet? Or are they timid and shy about it and have to grow into that role along with the respect? You do not get to choose Ryder's arc, you just get to flavour it in your own way. That's why I say you have to meet the game where it's at. If you go in trying to craft your own story, then the game's going to fight you at every turn. And that's why I subscribe to the conspiracy that the game wasn't supposed to have a character creator. It actually doesn't make sense for the game and gives the complete wrong impression of what the core of the RPG parts of the game are about. Whether the game should have gone in that direction is a different conversation, but I personally have always preferred concrete characters to player created ones. Don't play this game with a custom character, I implore you. The game offers 2 quick start options for a reason. Choose one of those instead and you'll have a much better time engaging with Sarah or Scott Ryder the way the game seems like it was intended. Andromeda is a massive game. I couldn't possibly explain all of it in a single video even if I wanted to. And I don't. The game is filled to the brim with stuff. Not all of it is great, but it's all there for you to discover. Everyone will find something in the game, something that makes their journey unique. I've given you a taster, now I hope you'll take the plunge and discover it yourself. Or if you bounced off it the first time, then maybe give it another chance with a new mindset. Without spoiling too much, Andromeda ends in a place where a sequel is not only open, but absolutely necessary. There's so much more to see, so much more to explore, and it would be such a waste to end the story here. The Andromeda Initiative was all about a better beginning, and maybe that's exactly what the Andromeda game needs as well, a second chance. After its rough development, rough reception, after killing the studio that made it, Andromeda deserves a better beginning. Maybe BioWare and EA won't ever give us that, but by giving it a second chance ourselves, maybe we can give it one instead.
We dream of exploring the unknown, of finding the edge of the map, and then discovering what lies beyond. When people look back on this, and they will, they'll remember we didn't give up. That we kept dreaming. That our first few faltering steps in Andromeda were the beginning of everything they know. We only get one chance to be first. So, let's go make history.
Been waiting 600 years for this.
Archive period, this is Shuttle 1. Switching to manual guidance.
Shuttle 2, taking your lead.
Good luck, Pathfinder team.
Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please do the like thing and the subscribe thing, and if you're feeling very generous, the comment thing. And if you're in a Mass Effect vid, that's a fucking tongue twister. If you're in a Mass Effect mood, I've got more videos for you to watch right here.